Minas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery, the Dead City, the Witch King's glowy green city of spooks. The city is iconic for Lord of the Rings fans, yet for such an important place it doesn't really appear too often in Tolkien's writings. As a result of that, it doesn't appear too often in adaptations of Tolkien's writings. Its most well-known appearance is in that Return of the King scene, where the Witch King leads the Morgul army forth. It appears briefly in a few video games, and its biggest appearance, which was in the video game Shadow of War, is almost entirely fan fiction. Seriously, Shadow of War is a good game, but it basically takes a giant shit on the lore. So on the 29th of October, Standing Stone Games will be showcasing the biggest take on Minas Morgul yet. This is pretty exciting for me because I think the quality of writing in the Lord of the Rings Online has actually improved since SSG have moved beyond Tolkien's writing. It's definitely been a welcome change from the really good and not totally predictable copied and pasted storylines of Rohan and Gondor. I'm not bitter at all. Since the fall of Sauron, they've had almost 100% creative freedom, and Minas Morgul should be no different in that regard. So for those who don't know, here's a quick history lesson. Minas Morgul was once known as Minas Ithil, built by Isildur in the end of the Second Age, and sister city to Minas Anor, which would eventually become Minas Tirith. During the War of the Last Alliance, Minas Ithil was actually briefly conquered by Sauron, but was retaken after Sauron's fall. During the next 2,000 years of the Third Age, Minas Ithil hardly gets mentioned. The only thing we know is that the city was never as populated or as important as Minas Anor, possibly due to its close proximity to Mordor. I'm sure Minas Ithil was a nice city, but living next to Mordor would have been pretty depressing after a while. In the 17th century, the Great Plague struck Gondor, and Minas Ithil was likely hit hard, as Gondor's fortresses guarding Mordor were entirely abandoned at this point. This would eventually lead to Minas Ithil's fall, as the Nazgul would retake Mordor during Gondor's weakness, and in the 2000th year of the Third Age they would besiege the city. They besieged the city for 2 years before taking it, which is odd because Minas Tirith is right there. I'm not sure why they didn't help Minas Ithil. Maybe the people of Minas Ithil were dicks and deserved it, who knows. Anyway, Minas Ithil fell to the Nazgul, was renamed Minas Morgul, and became the Witch King's new seat of power. For the rest of Minas Morgul's history, it stood as the main enemy against Gondor. It was here where Eomer, the last king of Gondor, vanished after accepting the Witch King's challenge, and it was from here where orcs would continuously attack Gondor, eventually resulting in the loss of Ithilien. During the War of the Ring, the massive army that fought at Osgiliath and the Pelennor Fields was the Morgul army, and as we all know, this army was entirely destroyed. Now, this is where the paths of LOTRO and the book seemingly diverge. In the books, Minas Morgul is empty following Sauron's defeat. On his way to the Black Gate, Aragorn destroys the bridge to Minas Morgul and later tears down the city during the Fourth Age. It was presumably rebuilt sometime in the Fourth Age, but we're not sure when or who by. The events of LOTRO are taking a different turn. It seems we'll be joining or leading an expedition into Minas Morgul similar to that of Mordor's storyline, and once again in relation to the Black Book of Mordor. The Black Book of Mordor has certainly raised a lot of questions so far, especially in the northern updates. I'm not sure how we'll go from the Vales of Anduin to Minas Morgul, but we do have to remember that we've left behind a lot of powerful villains in Mordor, so I'm assuming much of the story will have to do with dealing with them. After our adventures in Mordor and the North, we are well aware that while Sauron is defeated, some of his more powerful servants are still lurking around. The first and foremost is Gothmog, formerly Mordorith, formerly King Eomer himself. Although Gothmog is a wraith and therefore should have died when Sauron did, his appearance in Minas Morgul is almost guaranteed, as we know that he fled there in the aftermath of the Pelennor Fields. And he's now vulnerable, remember, because Golidir died and he was linked to Golidir and blah blah blah. Anyway, he's been a main villain of much of the game, and it's very likely that he will be one of the main villains in Minas Morgul. It would be kind of poetic for him to die in the very place he was originally corrupted into a servant of darkness. And if that is him on the expansion cover screen, then he has been given a cool new look that screams Nazgul but is way more stylish. Along with Gothmog, we have the Gerzul. I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. I've heard it a few times in the game, but it's just an odd word when you look at it. But anyway, they're Sauron's law-breaking, deathless servants who are vying control of Mordor following their master's defeat. The mouth of Sauron may be dead, but many others remain. We have Karazgar, who we've been chasing around for a few updates while he fucks dragons, as well as Ugrikor, who seems to have become the dominant power in Mordor in our absence. However, we also have several other Gerzul who haven't been seen before that might make an appearance. We have Rukor the Pale Herald, whose lore notes are the ones that we encounter in Lingris. We know that he has taken an interest in Shelob, who is slated to appear in a raid during this expansion. Karazgar also name-drops two other Gerzul, Mothgarod and Nulbaneth, during an instance in the Vales of Anduin. Considering these two guys were name-dropped in only the latest update, I'm expecting them to appear in some way. And can I just point out that the bad guys always have the cool names in these sorts of games. And finally, we have the enemies who aren't really aligned with the Gerzul. Uridani Stone Maiden, the sexy fire. she is literally just a sexy fire, and Barangos, the Rogmul, who is totally not a Balrog. Anyway, our brief dealings with them in Mordor would lead me to believe that they probably wouldn't appear in this expansion, at least as main villains. They seem kind of interested in doing their own thing, but the guy on the expansion cover screen kind of looks like a Rogmul, but he could be one of the other girls we haven't met, or maybe he's someone else entirely, or maybe he's Sarah Oakhart. I do think his design looks fantastic, so I'll be pissed if he isn't in the game. And of course there is Shelob, who has been summoning spiders across Middle-earth back to Lingris. We know that she'll appear as a raid boss, although we're not exactly sure how she'll appear in the story. So in terms of characters, SSG have given themselves quite a lot to work with. There's obviously all of Middle-earth's heroes that survived the War of the Ring, but they've also created some pretty compelling villains to fill Sauron's shoes. Depending on what SSG's next plans are, I'd say we'd probably end up killing half of them by the end of the expansion. The second half of the expansion is Mordor Besieged, which from the Q&As is kind of like Assassin's Creed in the sense that we'll be experiencing parts of the Second Age through the eyes of someone that was almost identical to us but lived thousands of years ago. Which is kind of feasible. It runs into a few problems because Elven players could have been alive back then. If you RP, maybe that kind of ruins it for you. The bigger problem though was that there were no hobbits at the War of the Last Alliance. So I'm not sure how they'll get around that. There won't really be any Hobbit ancestors running around. But you know, Hobbit players, they're kind of low on the list of priorities. Fuck Hobbits. But anyway, I don't think it could be worse than the High Elf being in a coma for 3,000 years storyline. I'm excited to see what they do, and if the explanation is stupid, then I'll still find it funny, just like the High Elf being in a coma for 3,000 years storyline. Anyway, thank you for watching. I've got more Lord of the Rings online videos planned, especially after the expansion, mostly to do with the lore and the story of the game. Hopefully this expansion is a good one. Thank you, Darth Gandalf out.